Hello, America and world. As you'll know, if you look on YouTube for your city, you know, long shots, pictures of cities from behind. When you see news stations, they often have cities behind them, and you could see and discern how there no food could be grown. Everything is tactically the suburbs before our founders were even born. Before there were cars, cranes, trucks, planes, sea vessels that could carry all this weight. Everything was tactically in nature to cause reliance upon criminal insidiousness natures of positive and negative treatments simultaneously, identity treatments and collusion slash S and collusions rather with and as collusion simultaneously as influences over motivations individually grouped and together bound all these ways with the individual down to every individual apart from the individual that has that bound too. In other words, the breaching method was relevant and is relevant to our logic now because it was relevant to the logic then, even though it wasn't addressed by the logic then. And where and how it was addressed, for example, through our founders, which has to be discerned. You don't leave out how they have to counter or extort the other founders and or nor why. How that could have been and is in our faces self-valued is relevant to how at each age of and nature of all locations through our own sense and sensibilities, use Jane Austen's phrase. The fact treatment nature is my own because not my own per admission of me and of all the people. Especially, like, for example, there are little girls with revelations, means to walk outside their house from a big tenement in New York City or from the small ones. The exception nature also, the difference, they'll make it comparative. In other words, we are not free. These are not our means. And you have to have simultaneously discernment of how this was sustained against the Native Americans. Simultaneously, you have to have discernment of uses of, narratives that blamed on other things other than themselves, the breaching method. And to an extent, it's where no one realized. This was sophistication, it is a sophistication that is superior to those of countries A through Z, individually grouped and together. Now, tactical ulterior from how we are individuals, group, locations, areas, ages, sexes, difference, and species of body of volume. Note how a group can't defend the finite. We have group logic. We have, quote, group think, unquote, relative to treatments of um, um, torture, self value by people that are in collusion, for example, still, where practical reason, use Immanuel Kant's phrase, is pretended, and that's forced. And that's pretended practice that got gotten away with because reliance upon that is what is actually recorded, already having been reliance upon James the substance and nature and the identity of Marbury versus Madison as value to us, as an only increasing value to us. See, what is only increasing value to us to understand, for example, is that we can only be its complete nature of relationship to itself, the identity that all things are at once, per its system. For Witten didn't invent us, but revealed us. as its own identity of volume, where volume equals value as nature / nature as value. Uses of words like theory, regardless of the substance of the theory, like with and names uses. When if they're arguing about, oh, did you read the theory of relativity? So, and Einstein's name. His name is being used. Oh, you're knocking Einstein. You know more. Little girl could know more than Einstein. The identity of relativity is denied. How the course of black pupils and whites of eyes became abridged. How it is bridged now. They can't even debate it without demonstrating with their logic, but they get away with it. That's increasingly and reliant upon both political parties and the exception nature effectively being and having been self-valued, employed self-valued, not for definitions of employment, discerned, but then through that. And that was sustained too. So why we have to understand that for the hurt, because that's, we'll never get through it that way. We have to just realize it. A breaching method to all locations, sickly distinctly too, because it effectively kept how sickly non-distinctly, not only not discerned, but how self-valued through other motivations, nature's needs, interests too, that it effectively maintained, propagated, but self-cultivated. It effectively maintained, self-cultivated. The World Trade Center attack was effectively maintained, used to maintain self-valued roles with torture that had been left entrenched, methods of it that are fact, truth, nature-oriented predicate acts. I am not a lawyer. A predicate act is relative to criminal insidiousness. Relativity exists. Criminal insidiousness natures of positive, negative, and of the identity treatments are in collusion. Every one time someone brings up the topic of black or what they call white or what they call clear. Criminal insidiousness is, we have to understand this phrase. This breaching method effectively knew that it could draw countries self-valued through defense of themselves, good excuses, and not inclusion as a raise, where again, others ourselves are being blamed exactly the way it needs, increasingly, to keep itself, the breaching method, from being discerned. And nature is demonstrating it to us. Since before cars, with slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, the suburbs were designed. And sickly distinctly northern and southern colonies, and the identities of the nation, of the countries associated with that. Too, they were abridged. They were fact, human nature enslaved, self-valued, tactical terrier from that identity of volume per science that we have to discern as the hyper-simultaneous, as that idea, as a distinct identity of sequence / simultaneous sequence, because we only have a portion of it as ourselves and as the volume as it actually is. And I'll do a video about the God variable, but it's different when you use it for as the God variable as an algebraic variable, where algebraic consciousness / consciousness algebraic. Where the consciousness, The consciousness algebraic and algebraic consciousness / algebraic consciousness are three identities of volume bound, where and how the value of contemplation is too. And so words like prayer and words like God were criminally re-engineered. Proofs of this are with the archaeological evidences as they are actually manifest. For example, but all identity of the ground locations are self-valued roles, needs, and natures, where their identities, and further additionally, where they are an identity as an identity of the ground. For example, because when we start appreciating, not leaving out the smallest finite distinctions, we are appreciating the value of the order of the finite that is conjunction to the order of that is beyond our control. Like, for example, how grouped aspects and species body of volume, we cannot move the species body of volume but one way, but by being positive, by being especially positive to its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that. So again, a breaching method had employed, as is actually discernible, true always, not denying the slightest finite detail, not valuing the slightest finite detail, having been or being denied. Or going to be denied. See, time is three natures of itself bound. As everything, with two identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. As further too, as two distinct, like as for example, the identity of the order of the finite. And to discern it as an identity is important because of its identity of relationship to itself. And science itself reveals, has means for us to discern together. Criminal insidiousness was propagated as an identity of the ground engineering, specifically knowing that nature would demonstrate this to us as and how answers are tactically are other than these tactically pretended with passions and emotions by the stewards they pretend of the sciences. How they get away. In other words, this is a certain type of victim predator, simultaneously a hyper victim predator. That is a certain type of slavery that has other told in replace of the short words and in replace of the long words that our founders, as the ones with the plan and the principle, conjunction to our principles of fact-driven nature or reason principle, which I believe is a phrase of Immanuel Kant. Principles. See, but there is one identity of order that as itself is only discernible for how it is distinctly bound. 5 identities of order. The order of the finite, the smallest finite detail of your body is distinct from the order of that is active. And that is the value, and distinct also from the value of what is to come. That is value now. So that's why we go to school. That's why we train, do training when things aren't directly for school. See, but before any school or homeschooling situation was set up, all identity of the ground's locations, each age of fact-driven nature, each age of correlation nature, was as effectively measured and maintained through our own, where and how the sustained part is relevant to what they did against the Native Americans first. And because denials of that are inherent needs by the nature of the employments that are discernible, only having been known since before founding, pounding drums. And know how if the Native Americans hadn't been the resistance against all the native slavery, sickly, distinctly forms and roles. Whether you're the guy who's the proverbial Uncle Tom, no, associated with Harry Beecher Stowe. Harry Beecher Stowe House and the Mark Twain House have roles with people directly and indirectly tied to a Robert Cheverry, who was a lawyer of Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, 18 USCs and things like that. I'm not a lawyer, but in other words, the identity of what is true always, not denying the slightest finite detail. And so again, to appreciate the word and the other, it can be used to reveal what I told you is recorded anyway. So in other words, the news media attached me to fake words in conversations with others who have recorded ties to people who have been doing this between on classrooms from the youngest ages. There are proofs even preschools, even daycare. There is a we know of the complete possessions and motivations. We know of some of them. And we know there are a lot of them for people to be native fact treatment nature qualities, aspects, and nature. Regarding, for example, Hartford has reportedly over 30 shootings this year already. And that's just shootings, and there are only about 300 something streets in Hartford. So it's like 10%. Or I mean, it's not less than two. It's about 3%. But in other words, that's just 1 year. And they say, oh, well, it's the gangs. The areas of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, in the interbranch, and the people on off the state judicial branch know at the where half of it is in Wethersfield, half of it is in Hartford. And houses next to it are involved with wire crimes, the Wethersfield police through time. And with predicate acts on and off child campuses. And with predicate acts on and off interbranch locations. In cases, increasingly, for example, getting away with it because they've been roles planting evidences at crime scenes, pretending passions and emotions and morality at crime scenes, relevant to where the counters, the police forms share relevant faith in each other, in their colleagues, in the people at other complete locations, in hierarchies that are differentially criminally foreign influenced by the same method and organization that has the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and insidiousness of people A through Z. For example, regarding the rights to vote. The rights to vote is communicated. See, people say other than they communicate. And our formal stewards do because of what I caught being and haven't been exploited on and off all locations, which is simultaneously Hyper additionally, having been timed, roles, motivations, interests, needs to exploit on and off campuses. Also, all campuses and homeschool bodies individually grouped in together. So we have individuals recorded with roles with more things. Like how many people are they putting in jail each year relative to what I caught them doing, where they have also, quote, the right to lie, unquote, by a guy they said is named James Comey, who's also involved with the Congress used remotely criminally foreign influence with former director of the FBI Robert Luskin and a whole bunch of people with interbranch families associated on and off Central Connecticut State University with with English teachers, with conversations they had with through kids and through themselves, with police forums, with English teachers. Now they also, through time, Wethersfield police, directly and indirectly through others, they reported, confessed, and demonstrated criminally foreign influence uses of the corners of streets, like the corner of Carriage Hill Drive and Wethersfield and Fairlane Drive, which has roles with Mike Pandoff, people on off Central Connecticut State University. There's a Joe DeMoro who has a cousin, Joe DeMoro, and both of them and they have brothers. One of them has a sister too, and they're involved through time with former director of the FBI Robert Luskin, various natures of federal criminals. Involved also where they have the sense and sensibilities of educators and of their family members, timed as the names and people associated with them and with their kids kept needing to hide life progressions with areas of overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Even if it's just because they're undercover, because they have acting coaches involved with the corner of there's a brick building and there's a house across house across the street from at the corner of Church Street and Main Street. Now also they have privacy narratives. This is where they prevent people privacy by making up stuff, where they plant evidences and pretend passions and emotions at location and online. They say, do whatever, and about their motivations, because to keep that quality of fact cheap in nature. So there was no comments in the video because I put it was for kids too, but it is for kids too. It's on each. We have the campuses in Hartford and Wethersfield, Rocky Hill, New Britain, for example, with names connected with the same instances where they have brought up where relevant is how they kept and keep everyone effectively needing to hide the same illusions together. The worst patients and criminals of the interbranch have been recorded before, how kept needing since before they were caught, crimes together, and their ties to forensics locations and state police involved with it, and Wethersfield police. Again, involved also with the FBI through time and with other agencies. And so they have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes manifest, and then pretending others manifest too. See, we have to discern what is simultaneously recorded. Recorded is how they have people, they tell people either to not speak when they have upcoming charges against them and they hurt them for that as innocents, and or they tell them, they have the reliance upon lawyers that have recorded, like a Trantolo and Trantolo is involved with courts fabricating audio and video transcripts at crime scenes and with various. Now there's also police involved with switching names, forging names, and their roles with mayors and people on and off the Wethersfield town law offices, on and off. Those are simultaneously Wethersfield Police Department. They've been switching names, forging names, fabricating police reports, fabricating conversations with kids and then as adults because of how they've had roles of uses of people pretending passions and emotions against complete strangers, and as people that mixed with them, that all exception each for demonstration, same thing. There are employments where they use the time treatments at court locations, for example, relevant to interpretations of which trials were about, real or made up. Also because of the relativity to. All right, thank you. So if you guys respond to a particular premise. Fix the fake words in conversations, because those are evidences, crimes in cases. Those are predicate acts roles. That WFSB, WTNH. There's a Jack Zano. I don't know Jack Zano. Paul Zano. He pretended to. He's involved with sequence shifts, federal evidences, crimes, and child abuse, nature of identity theft, fraud roles. I don't know Paul Zano, with fake exceptions. And as the names that attach me to fake conversation style as a kid, as people who were in other classes who pretended to know me, and with relevant confessions. And these are people they brought up. They bring up their names and other things, and then they pretend we brought it up. Now, these are also people, again, on off the state prison offices. Also enter into the sciences. There are names with the sciences, individually grouped and together, being and having been employed to be self-valued, criminally foreign influence, certain type of victim, certain type of hyper-victim, where it's reaction, non-reaction is employed to keep, if anyone speaks things rightly with short words, they're attached to fake, evidences, crimes that are committed against them. Natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and or uses of those in the past too, relevant, because it's what is relevant to where and to how they get away with pretending that free speech had been defended, and or exceptions to that, to pretend that they had been legitimately accounted for, because they had not. So this is really what, in other words, there is an employment of people pretending that voting means what it does not, as people who are simultaneously communicating to us that they don't and will not, they don't have the capacity to admit, to allow admitted what is actually recorded. We don't, and we agree about these things. More, the only reason, only groups that fight against, in other words, there's the human species abridged in as the value of why and how we are individual, grouped in species volume /S. Those are three distinct identities of volume science. What could be positive to an individual, a group, and everyone together as a country, for example. As countries A through Z, we are all tactical terrier. From what our name means to the hyper-simultaneous, what has us bound, individual, grouped, and together. She has needs for our uses of our words, like value, like identity, all words. The, a, and the definite articles. They have a conjunction / hyperconjunction to the identity that's hyper-simultaneous, which is not necessary to discern because its identity of relationship to itself could be positive or negative, relative to Earth's a special difference, and or it is forced from here. And so if we want to learn about what a logic gate is about, for example, if we want to learn what language is about, for example, we want to learn what math is about, for example, per it. We have to discern how these are distinct identities of simultaneous nature / sequence nature, right to left, and sequence / simultaneous nature, left to right. And what we can discern with this too, a semi-nature hyperconjunction to what can be semi-nature. It's also temporary positive, also lasting positive to its a special difference. Earth's a special difference as its own simultaneously. This is where consciousness can be shown. The identity of the hyper invisible, but still discernible, as we are shown when we imagine a little girl walking out from one of those buildings. At what age could she walk out? In other words, into the front yard, which is a New York City street, for example, which is a building in Ukraine or Russia. The suburbs look exactly the same way that the breaching method before our founding parents were even born put in place. Sickly distinctly, people from other countries and our own sciences stewards effectively maintained other things, others, or selves, blamed for slavery. All and worse than denials of exceptions and exception nature that appeared to that had roles in it. They had to hide their roles with countering slavery. They told us to get the breaching method unabridged. Now, regardless if George Washington said this or not, it's what he communicated when he said he did not chop down the cherry tree. I mean, and he cannot tell a lie. In other words, he wanted us to explain how they had to still lie. They had to still entertain what couldn't be entertained. And the Constitution unabridged is defended as fact, human nature simultaneously. Now we're going to deal with this fact, human nature as criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, and identity treatments simultaneously. Because we're dealing with where and how our logic is being led by the identities as greater than math and more finite than math, distinctly as its own system. And so as conjunction, as the natural logic gate, as the naturally what reveals how properly to speak about things. Vaccines. And so comment, but but don't comment unless you're going to deal with the sequence shifts. That's the subject. The names forging and switching, that's the subject. Stacking predicate acts, fake conversations between people on and off campuses, that's the subject. There was also how the military is involved. Exceptions in exception nature, like people with the prisons, names with the prisons, their kids involved. A whole bunch of people with Middletown tied to a suburb of Bajario, for example, who has kids involved with foreign and domestic medical doctors. Also involved with the kids of a Leahy family with Facebook page, with upskirt page, adults upskirt pictures of the kids around their own. Because these are between campuses too, connected. Rolls with things that the breaching method set up them to self-value rolls with. And that is the law. So increasingly incapable of speaking for the identity of the law, increasingly capable of speaking for the nature of the law, increasingly incapable of speaking for the physics of the law. For example, regarding how more people are going than there are streets in our cities, getting hurt, where that could have been prevented, we cannot leave out the collusion/S and how they got away with it and get away with it. You can't leave out how what is recorded through time. When I was in grammar school in Wethersfield, there was a former Mayor Gold and people associated him that affected confessions and a O'Brien family. These are executives. These are my sources. Strangers that sought me out to confess, demonstrate, record communicatively that they were that and how they were criminally foreign influenced. Victims, victim predators, hyper victim, hyper predators, and that they were going to pretend other. And then they communicated and demonstrated through time they were consciously aware of that being and having been exploited. They don't know the extent of it. They know it became tied and was tied to the World Trade Center. They don't know the extent of it. This is how different levels and natures of hierarchy and lowerarchy and the complete top-down with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the military families involved next to the schools, involved with their roles with drugs and their roles with FISA courts and ways and reasons, whatever they have, to let them get away with such. So also the corners, So they've been fabricating. The courts have been fabricating evidences with the news media, with retired and standing into branch, because of the roles of themselves, distinctly, but also non-distinctly, being and having been criminally foreign influenced through their careers. This method knew that they wouldn't be able to speak for the law, but pretend other anyway. So it was recorded. There was a whole bunch of people involved with Sandy Hook, Newtown. Also, the phrase election deniers is involved with corruption at mental health locations across the country. They have been fabricating conversations with people, putting people to fake uses of drugs into databases. All exception, nature, or demonstration, the same thing too. And now these are people also who have been enrolled with names involved with the kids in various capacities. A whole bunch of people involved with Mill Woods Park, like have criminally foreign influence roles through time with child offenders, interbranch. Eric Jensen, I don't know him. He made an exception to pretend other there. That's one of the times. In other words, that's one of the things that I learned. They make confessions from people years later who are tied to people that you've never seen around each other, where they're putting fake things in location and locking sense and sensibilities, use Jane Austen's phrase, to roles with mass identity theft, fraud, slanders, criminal and since natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, identity treatments simultaneously. And so, vaccines. On off the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan, right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before they were taken out by the two planes that took them out. Proven after the attack, but right in the Ninth Circuit Court, right before the attack, panel of judges had been shown legal papers that had been insidiously post-dated from inside the court to appear late, as people that were also involved with confessions about the World Trade Center and names involved years before. Also as people who colluded time, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, take not even realizing Saudis to force roles with them. People from Korea to force roles with them. People from Laos force roles with them. People from Italy force roles with them. People with, all these countries. They're hiding behind that, where they have them shared on and off campuses. There is an Oliveri family and there was a Cololo family who was involved with some wire crimes with Wethersfield police, switching and forging names with military police. Also on off Trinity College, per people on Trinity College, associated with them, and with predicate acts on my street through time relevant. The people that that used to live here too. And I had not been living at my home for a number of years. So there's a Terry, and there's a I don't know Terry Cleese or Terry Lewis. I don't know his extended family members also associated with Trinity College. There's a Zano family, and he says a Puzo family. Only thing he ever said to me, make confessions, because they locked each other and everyone around each other. Sense and sensibilities they cannot afford. Quality of fact, human nature. We must be a 10. Make sure someone get people of Hartford and of the cities of Wethersfield, get them on paper. I'll show you how to fix the problems with abuses of each age of factory. You think these are means at elderly homes? Watch what goes on and off every place, and usage of names and spots, locations next to it. We're gonna observe how this was relevant to what is sustained against Native Americans, sickly distinctly, to keep out sickly non-distinctly from being discerned. Not one has learned. Vaccines. I teach you things.